Oh, delis. I learned from doing my Facebook Live videos that it's a little better.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
7 live out of 44. Eight live. Yeah, they're showing up.
Are you on mic?
Mm-hmm. Should be. Yep. Yep. Turn screen share on. Okay, let me just kind of check this application window. There he is. Okay, I'm going to go use the application window. But when I go back and forth to the Prezi, so use the Prezi, that's a little different. Yeah, it's a little different. Ah, there's Marty. There's somebody.
Mm-hmm. Screen sharing works.
What?
All right, we need to make sure there's an easy way for both of us to be in frame. Yeah. I guess. Let's center that back. Okay. There we go. That's better. Oops. Okay. Someone said, oh, I thought that was help. Hi, Kendall. Almost time.
It's almost time. That's right. Mm. Ooh.
Hello, Joyce. Lou. Wait, are we on
Lou
camera?
S.
Lou S. Are we? I hope everyone can see us and hear us.
Oh, type in yes. If you start, yes, you should. Then you should be able to see.
Right. One minute until showtime.
It's interesting when most of the people who give you quotes are people who you don't know.
They didn't ask me for a quote. Anyway.
Well, because they knew you'd give me a quote.
Oh.
And nobody's going to. Tanana Reeve do, A Stranger to Stephen Barnes. And,
Okay. Oh, it's
totally objective.
It's 3:00.
It's 3:00.
Welcome to our Afrofuturism webinar. I'm Tanana Reeve do.
And I'm Stephen Barnes.
And this segment is something that I've dubbed Navigating Haunted Spaces, where we're talking about a lot of works that don't seem to have a lot to do with each other on the surface, but they're all about, in my view, navigating haunted spaces.
Cool. You want to take a look at the Prezi, or do you want to just kind of start?
I'm just going to give them the overview of what the class will be. Then we'll do our usual chit chat, and then we'll go to the Prezi. So today we'll be discussing my short story Summer, which hopefully you've had a chance to read. If not, there may be spoilers. I'm just warning you. We'll also talk about the John Sayles film, The Brother from Another Planet, which is an Afrofuturism cult classic. We'll be discussing the music of Alice Coltrane, the jazz artist. And then we have an amazing interview with John Jennings, graphic artist and illustrator of the new Octavia Butler graphic novel adaptation by Damian Duffy of Kindred. So that's some of John Jennings' work. We'll be talking to John Jennings about a whole bunch of great stuff. But
yeah, in some ways, Brother from Another Planet might almost be the first Afrofuturist movie that I can clearly remember ever seeing.
I don't remember now any others.
Because I remember a conversation with Ursula K. Le Guin at a science fiction convention about the dearth of such films, and that was the only one we could think of. Actually, she's the one who thought of it. To her credit, she went on to create a couple of different novels that dealt with Black characters after that.
Oh, wow, look at you.
It's possible. They may have been in the shoot anyway. They may have, and I don't know.
I think you gave her a little nudge there.
It's possible.
Now, wasn't there a Harry Belafonte sort of post-apocalyptic piece?
Oh, you're talking about The World, the Flesh, and the Devil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was predated.
That would definitely predated it.
But this, The Brother from Another Planet, is distinguished in that it is about a Black alien, and there's space travel, or at least a space landing involved. We never actually see much of the space travel. So sure, it was almost a singularity for a long time.
Well, and because it deals largely with Black culture, it takes place in Harlem.
Right.
Deals mostly with Black people having Black relationships. It feels more, even though it's created by a white director, John Sayles, who spent his MacArthur Genius Grant money to make it. World of Flesh and the Devil is much more of a typical Hollywood film. It's kind of a morality, liberal morality play.
Yeah, The Brother from Another Planet is definitely an art piece compared to most Hollywood films. It feels indie to me, but anyway, we'll talk about that.
Okay, it is. I think pretty sure it'll be considered indie.
Yeah, it is indie. It is indie. So let's just catch everybody up. Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here. Feel free to chime in with comments and questions, and we'll get to them as we can. We've had an interesting week. Steve got his book cover for 12 Days, his upcoming novel.
Yeah, you're saying it backwards. Sorry, you're saying it backwards.
I see if it's backwards.
I think it's backwards.
Okay, but there it is, and I like the image of the mother and child running. Actually, it's not backwards.
It's not backwards?
Look at that.
Oh, cool.
See?
All right, good.
Give little faith.
So,
tell them about that and when that comes out. Okay,
well, this will be out in just about a month. I've noticed that there's some advanced readers copies that are floating around, and the reviews have been pretty good. You know, I'll tell you, it's always difficult to figure out how to hold my emotions when it comes to a book. I mean, there's a part of me that loves seeing the positive reviews, but if I let myself feel too positive about the positive reviews, when I get a negative review, it hits too hard. So I find myself feeling a little distant from it. It's like I'm like reading my reviews through a sheet of glass. It's like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
You're a brave man that you even read your reviews. I learned to avoid Amazon long ago.
Did you?
Oh my God, yes.
Why, did you get a lot of trash talk?
Well, no, it's just, that's the thing. A lot of it is positive, but just the one or two little negative comments really get to you. That's why there's this conversation on Twitter. People will tag artists when they're criticizing their work. Why? Why are you going to like jump into someone's space and say, by the way, I really hated that song? Or,
yeah, that's
I really
terrible
hated that
song.
book.
Yeah, it's awful. It sucks.
It's fine to have a private conversation with your friends, but why? These are people, why drag them into that conversation?
If art is self-expression, and I think that it is, and we've tried to talk about a lot of different ways that people express, art in their work, whether it's short stories or books or novels or movies or television or graphic art or music. We keep showing you different ways that the same ideas can be expressed, so that you can kind of get the sense that your ideas can come out in 1,000 different ways.
Sure.
You know, there are so many different ways that you can treat an idea, that you can express an idea, and so many different ways that you can get that idea to your audience. And what we want you to do is to start with a pure creative impulse, and then to be able to figure out, how do I get this to the person that I want to get it to?
Right.
And to understand that you might have to twist and turn and bob and weave and pogo stick through a minefield, as I often put it. But the fight is worth it.
Oh, sure.
You know, it's going to hurt at times. But I think that for an artist, it hurts even more to not express who it is that you are.
Absolutely. When you are an artist, you must express. I was joking. We were at a career day this week at our son's school, and had 3 different opportunities to talk to kids who wanted to be writers. And there were a lot of them who actually self-identified as writers and were already writing. And that was what I told them. Just be sure you want to be an artist for the right reasons, not just necessarily that someone told you, oh, you have a talent for that, or wow, you can really put a sentence together. But being an artist is more about sort of that drive that comes from within. It's great if someone else recognizes that and helps you see it sooner. But some people are in sort of a self-imposed kind of, journey toward other people's desires for them rather than their own desires. That's what I'm talking about.
It gets very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
It's a little bit as if you do something unique. You do something that's special, and it's you're expressing your heart and you're learning skill, and you put your ideas out. And then one day, if you're lucky, one of them will get popular. One of them will get, hopefully really popular. People start saying, wow, give us more of this. And if you give them more of this particular thing, and it's still in alignment with your heart, then you're lucky.
Then great.
That's great. But if your heart says to do something different, and you give them that thing just because you want to get the money, you're on the road to hell. You're in real trouble. I've told this story many, many times about a writer who came to one of my book signings. And he was an older writer than I, and he gave me his business card. It said freelance hack and literary mechanic. And this guy was dead of alcoholism within a year.
Right. That was his self-view.
Yeah, his self-view, his self-loathing. He was not speaking to his art. He was not expressing his heart. So what we're trying to do is to, we can give you the structures of fiction, and we can give you writing assignments. We can do those things. But more importantly, what we're hoping you're doing is you're looking at the way all these different creative artists are holding the question of, how can I keep my soul in the midst of commerce? How can I express myself over time? And even if you're not interested in creating art, hopefully you will never look at the creative art that you appreciate
the same way
ever again. You'll always see more deeply into it.
See how I jumped in and stole his line there at the end?
Yes.
Anyway, so that's a great transition
we knew that we'd eventually
a great transition to my short story collection, Go Summer.
Yes.
Although I only assigned one story, which is the story Summer, which is also in this collection. But this is the collection it comes from. And you see there's a child on the cover. A lot of my fiction, it turns out, has to do with children. Could you put up the Prezi for me, darling?
Yes, I will.
If you thought the story was evil, wait until you see the Prezi. Because, okay, happy Mother's Day weekend. Here, make it full screen. And then, there we go. So, navigating haunted spaces. Look at little Precious down there. Just click on that one. Yeah, there you go. So, isn't that evil? This is a beautiful little child. Someone's child they put on the internet who came up in my Tidler search. So, I apologize in advance to this family. But, when you talk about a haunted space, and this is something I like to write about a lot, it's those haunted spaces within. Like, Steve, you and I talk about Breaking Bad a lot.
Yeah.
And how Walter White, the protagonist, horrible, monstrous character, might never have reached his peak monstrosity or even glimpsed into his peak monstrosity, if not for very specific circumstances. No,
absolutely. And this week on Facebook, we've been debating about whether or not Walter White is evil and whether or not Jimmy, in Better Call Saul, is evil. I would say that they are, that Walter White is evil and strong, and that Jimmy is evil and weak.
Ah.
That Jimmy has been evil, has been lying and cheating and stealing since he was a kid, whereas Walter White has probably been honest his whole life. And it is only when he gets sick and needs money fast that he is forced to discover something about himself, that he likes it. He likes the power. He has a talent for this. He has an ability to do this. That ultimately, the question of at what point does he step away from the thing that, well, I just had to do it, to the point of I liked doing it. There's, it's critical that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It doesn't matter what their intentions are. What matters are their actions.
So I bring that up because this is character in Summer. And I'm terrible even with my own protagonist's names, so I have to look up her name.
That's okay.
There are so many of them. But in any case, this particular character might never have known what kind of, I'll call it, quiet monstrosity she was capable of as a mother.
Right.
Unless she faced this situation. And I think I like my fiction to both analyze the internal struggles and journeys of people in the African diaspora, but also just people, and those external struggles, and juxtapose them, okay? So the internal struggle for this story, Summer, is a woman who has been overwhelmed by motherhood, particularly because her husband is not there. He's deployed, so he's not there to help her. So she's alone, and she's feeling isolated in a small town. It's a perfect storm of misery for her, and her daughter has a difficult personality. Full disclosure, when I was inspired to write this story, I had come into contact with a child who had also come into his personality at about 18 months. And
what child could that have been?
we have a wonderful son, and he was really a model baby. I mean, he started sleeping through the night the day he was supposed to start sleeping through the night. He was a very good-natured baby. Hit the toddler years, and a little more of an irate nature started to emerge. And it's like, oh, okay, I see. This is how it's going to be. So it's sort of a readjustment of your emotions, which was an easy transition for me because I had art to process. I was talking to myself maybe in the story a little bit. Like, okay, you better watch out. You better watch out.
Well,
make sure that you rise to the occasion. You do not fall.
Well, it's also just the fact that all relationships have moments where they're, wonderful, yes, and moments where you're questioning your sanity for having gotten into them in the first place. So the way we deal with those moments.
Okay, can you put our live feedback up?
Okay.
People are confused, or maybe they're not seeing the present. Well, anyway, they're not seeing our image and they miss us.
They miss us?
Yeah.
Oh, so, The fact is that how do I put this? In any relationship, whether it's a parental relationship or a romantic relationship, a business partnership, whatever, there are going to be moments where everything is working and other moments that are really the dark night of the soul.
Right.
And it's the way we deal with those moments that reveal our character.
Right.
I mean, we know that. And it is, character is what is revealed under pressure, which is what you try to do with a story. You try to choreograph pressure so that your character's true nature is revealed. If they can find some way to sleaze out of it, then their true character is never revealed, as long as they can be clever. But what happens when you run out of clever? What happens when you run out of clever? What remains is the truth. So parents, and one of the reasons I think that medical schools will push people into exhaustion, law firms will push people into exhaustion, is they want to determine your character. What are you like under pressure? And fatigue is one of the kinds of pressure that they can control to a degree. And I know that they do the same thing in boot camp. So I can't swear that maybe law firms are just chewing people up and spitting them out because they can get the hours. Maybe the same thing is true with medical schools and working in hospitals. But I suspect that you might want that, to have an opportunity to see who are you? Who are you really? Not under your mask, but once you start getting really tired. So this story, your story, tests a woman. And what happens during that test?
We don't find out until the end. She doesn't know until the end that she is willing. We can only imagine. I leave it a little bit open-ended, but it's pretty clear, I think, that she's at least thinking about not giving her child a remedy that will banish a demon. Because she likes the demon child better. That's the truth. She likes the demon child better. And she's willing to risk who knows what would happen to her. She doesn't know where her real baby is. Her baby, it looks like her baby. If the demon is in there, then where's her baby?
See, I can't write like that. I don't even know where this comes from. She's so nice.
I mean, it's like, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if it would fit like what Robert McKee, the great screenwriting teacher, calls the negation of the negation. It's like, it's probably not as horrible because she didn't literally kill the child herself.
No. The negation of the negation is hate masquerading as love, for instance.
Oh.
What she has failed a particular test, but I think that the story is asking the question, what are we? What are we really?
Exactly it. And that dovetails into the external conflict of the story. And there's a little bit of history behind the unearthing of bones that I want to go into. Background for Summer is that some years ago, I decided that I wanted to write more short fiction. I've talked about that. And I specifically wanted to create a fictitious town that would be similar, at least, that would be similar to Castle Rock for Stephen King, but really it was more inspired by Yoknapatawpha County and Faulkner's work, where it was like this really, this county that he explored in several works, and you get to know characters throughout that county. And I really wanted to do that, so I created Gracetown, which is a rural Florida town that has a questionable racial history, like most rural Florida towns. And I symbolize that. I think this is the first story where I mentioned the unearthing of bones. And then I expanded upon the theme of the unearthing of bones in a companion story called Ghost Summer, which is about a ghost hunter. And it revolves much more about the bones that are introduced in this story. Well, the irony of this and the unearthing of bones is that after I wrote the stories, I heard from the Florida Attorney General's office that we had a relative who possibly had been buried at the Dozier School in Marianna, Florida in 1937. Right. Okay. And it was so eerie to me that I had been already broadcasting these stories of bones, and then those bones come back at me in real life. And I'm actually writing a novel now set in Gracetown that's much more about that reformatory. Our pilot is set in Gracetown. So
now one of the interesting things about that pilot is that, okay, so this production company buys the rights to Ghost Summer.
Right.
And they wanted us to create a television series set in there. Now, you were very, very busy at the time that this was all happening. So I took the primary responsibility of trying to figure out how to do this. How could we take...
Because none of the characters in these stories are actually appearing in our pilot.
None of them.
It's just the town that is the setting.
What I had to do is I had to try to channel you. I had to try to read the stories and think about what I knew about you and what I knew about those little southern towns and try to create a world where these stories could take place, but we could also have a continuing character and a continuing set of events. And you felt that I more or less managed to
capture that.
To capture that. I know that at this point, I have no idea who came up with what character, who came up with what thread, who came up with this, who came up with that. Yes, that's right. Well, you always said that eventually we'd start, reading each other's minds.
Yeah.
And your mind is, mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Well, when we pitched it at this network, we talked about the idea of a town looking for redemption, and that the only path to redemption was through unearthing the secrets of the past.
Yes.
And this is where that first whiff starts to appear in the story. And I juxtapose that against this character's internal struggle.
Okay, so what's the theme?
Because wait, let me finish my thought. Yeah. She's struggling with her growing impulse, basically to accept a demon into her life rather than her child. That growing impulse. While Old Man McCormick, I don't know that there's a character the McCormicks also appear in our series. They were a rich growing family. And terrible things happened, former slaveholding family. And terrible things happened, and there are bones being unearthed on their land. Okay, so it's like this is something that happened on their property. And there's a kind of culpability implied in this that has been undiscussed, undisclosed. Certainly, it has not found any sort of justice. So his family is swirling with all this controversy and guilt. And the reason I had Danielle meet Old Man McCormick in that parking lot at the end, and he admires her baby, and she's sort of extending humanity to him at a time when other people are shunning him, is because she's getting a deeper insight into the fact that evil isn't always black and white, or what people consider evil to be isn't always black and
You
white.
see, this is where I felt that there was a moral ambivalence to the story, that our loved ones, our children, contain different aspects.
Mm-hmm.
That this mother who is fatigued, afraid, alone, is beginning to believe that her child is possessed.
Mm-hmm.
And that she has to make a choice. Does she want to change the child? Can she love the child as the child is?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a challenge we always have with our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't know whether or not that was a deliberate thing that you were doing with that story, but it is a challenge that we have.
Absolutely.
It's what is true. What is true is that, all of us pray that people will accept us as we are, meet us where we are, give us an opportunity to change. This child, a baby that is crying at 3:00 in the morning when you're exhausted, can seem like a demon.
And then when they have more personality and more ability to actually literally cause you pain and this kind of thing, the challenges compound. And someone made the note, it was nice to see a story that wasn't just about an angelic child.
Right.
It's difficult. Obviously raising children.
Yeah, because if all of the stories are always about angelic children, what happens when you have a child who is, disobedient, that is afraid, that is angry? Are we not to love these children?
Right. And we don't have the tools sometimes for it, especially if we don't have the experience from our own childhood. We can't draw on the way we were or the way our friends were. It's just like a rediscovery each time sometimes, or you could have 3 different kids and they'll have 3 very different personalities. So I thought about this story when I was reading Colson, Whitehood's Underground, and how, often slave mothers, to prevent children from being born into slavery and abused and wrested away from them, would terminate their pregnancies. That was their way of exerting a kind of a power. So there was no over romanticization of childbirth during the slavery period at all. It could, and even if you were very, very poor, it can represent deeper hardship and more opportunities to fail for a lot of families and whatnot. So I wanted to speak to the true difficulties and struggle that come with parenting, especially single parenting. And a lot of people read this story and don't judge Danielle at all, frankly. In fact, I had one student read it and say, I just thought she wanted some time to herself. I mean, I guess that's one point of view, right? So wait, there's a question. Is the old man starting to feel regret because he recognized what was in the baby? Oh, no. I don't think he recognized the baby. He recognized the baby's beauty. He just saw the external portrait of a lovely child. And I think he was just moved by that. And it was more her reaching out to him that was the point. When she's been gossiping about him the whole story, cussing out his family for generations, and then she has an opportunity to meet him, and she doesn't give him a cold shoulder at all. She welcomes his conversation and even grants him a kind of grace. Maybe, who knows about those bones? Who knows if what will happen, or if there's something they should feel guilty for. Basically, who am I to judge? is where her head is at.
Who am I to judge? What I suggest that you guys do is that some of you are writers and some of you are readers. If you're readers, read a story once and then read it a second time and ask yourself what you think the creative impulse behind it was. What do you think that the writer is saying about the nature of humanity? If you're a writer, on the other hand, do the same thing, but then ask yourself what you think human beings are, how you might have changed that story, how you might have changed the end of it, the beginning of it. Does this reflect your philosophy of what human beings are? Can you remember the moment at which you developed your philosophy? If you can write the story about the moment you had that epiphany, such that your reader can feel what you went through, you might imagine writing a story that is read by a mother on a night when her child will not go to sleep and she is exhausted. She wonders whether or not she can love this child. And you write something that helps her see that babies have the full spectrum of emotions just like adults do.
Right.
You know, that they need us like roses need rain. And this little demon baby needs a mommy. And this mommy needs this little demon baby.
Oh my God.
But it's the truth.
Heart is in the eye. Well, okay.
You know, it's like, you know, I think that all we're asking you to do in your work is tell the truth about what it is that you see. Have the courage to actually put it out there. And some people think that you're strange, especially if you are committed to telling the truth. If you're not just trying to smooth it over, you can either be bland, you know, or you can tell your truth and take the risk that some people are going to hate what you said, but other people are going to need what you said. So you take a look at all the different pieces of art that we've shown you over the course of this class. We've only got 3 more classes after this. In every one of them, people were taking pain that had to do with the experience of the African diaspora and turn it into self-expression, try to process it as much as possible with their wisdom, their skill, convey it in the tools that are used, the language that is used in their particular art form, so that someone on the other side gets an emotion and hopefully can decode it. When we're asking you to step behind the curtain. You're not just look at the puppet show from the front. That's fun. But to actually understand the skill, you know, or the magic show. It's fun to see the magic as somebody makes a 747 disappear or whatever, but to understand the skill that went into it, the artistry that goes into it, the way people are playing with human perceptions through language and metaphor and simile and poetic language, the way they're leading your mind with images, leading your mind knowing how you're going to interpret language. And the artistry, to me, takes the entire thing to a completely new level. I love understanding how these images were made, how these emotions were produced in large audiences, because what we're saying is this storytelling can change the world.
That's our hope.
That's our hope.
Story will say something different, perhaps, to each person who experiences that story. There are a lot of ways you can interpret Summer. There are a lot of ways you can interpret a lot of different works. So, Steve, if you would put the Prezi up again.
Yes, I'll put the Prezi up again.
I was misreading those comments as previous comments when we were talking about seeing us. But we're going to talk about The Brother from Another. Really, the Black experience in America as epitomized by the Black experience in Harlem.
Well, that's how Black people see it. The other way of looking at it is simply a story of immigration. Okay? So that allows people to go more universal.
Well, he's using both immigration and slavery images.
Yes, he is.
No question about it.
No question about it.
It opens on
Ellis
Island. So obviously the immigration.
Yeah. But I think that because he's going so deeply into Black images, he goes to jazz clubs, he's in Harlem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The images of slavery, the slavers coming after him are not an integrated group. If he had not wanted color to be a part of it, he would not have set it up as Black versus white.
No, absolutely.
He just wouldn't have. So I think that what you want to look at there is the fact that even with something that is as clearly a racial metaphor as this, people who want to appreciate what's going on will find a way to change the metaphor so that it applies to them too. In the same way that Hidden Figures is largely about racism. In order for it to become the huge success it had to be more about sexism.
Right.
So as long as if you tell your story properly, people will find a way into it. They need, and you need to give them that. So go for it.
So let's talk about some of the things. I hope you had a chance to watch The Brother from Another Planet. If you missed it, of course, it's not too late. He wakes in confusion after landing at Ellis Island. The Statue of Liberty behind him. Not so subtle symbolism in the opening of the story, but he's also dressed in slave rags, and you can see that in this movie poster. Actually, if you could see a full body shot, you can see even better. His pants are very tattered. No, we can't fix that.
Okay.
His pants are very tattered. So I think he is having it both ways. He's doing both the slavery allegory and the immigration allegory. my students often write about how immediately he's chased by the police. They forget that he stole a piece of fruit before he got chased. They really do. They completely overlook the fact that he stole the fruit, and it's all about the police chase him, the police chase him. Yes, Sales makes a point that as soon as he sees the badge, he knows that he should be afraid. So this fear of authority, fear of police, fear of slave catchers, they're all one and the same to him. And he has that immediate recognition. But what he doesn't understand is capitalism. And I think that's what my students are missing. It's not just that the police were chasing him because he was black. They were they were chasing him because he stole the fruit.
No, it's chasing because black people are thieves. That's what John Sayles is trying to say.
But in any case, but obviously the director was making a point about the relationship between police and the community. He comes back to that again in the film. What else? His alienness is obvious from his misshapen foot, funky toenails.
3 toes.
Yeah, the 3 toes. He lands in almost this post-apocalyptic cityscape, which is completely deserted until daylight when he ends up in Harlem. There, boom, you've got the Afro-Latin music playing, the shouting, the music, the exchange, interactions. The first person to speak to him as a black Muslim. I tell people when you're watching film, almost nothing is by accident. That's not universally true. We had some things happen in our short that were purely by accident, but often, especially a director like Sayles, there's a reason for every shot. There is he wants you to find significance in that first conversation being with the black Muslim, and that he's chased by the police. And then we have a conversation of xenophobia among the blacks at the bar. So it's not just the black-white dynamic, although he is chased by white slave catchers, etc., but even within the black community, which eventually will welcome him. They're a little wary at first. He might have AIDS and all this because maybe he's Haitian, really super ignorant comments based on xenophobia. And so actually, let me check you guys' comments to see if you have any questions coming up. No. Yeah, the brother from another planet. Some people are not comfortable with the fact that he doesn't speak in the film. Joe Morton's character is a mute, and it's a device by the filmmaker that makes him basically harmless feeling, almost childlike when he interacts with people. And then he's a sounding board. So you have a series of soliloquies, as he goes from place to place, people just tell him their story.
Right.
And it's a storytelling device.
It's also, I think it's logical. I mean, why would he speak English?
True.
I mean, why he's an escaped slave. It's like an escaped slave landing in Germany or Japan. Why would they speak that other language?
Yeah. So there's that. But that's really most of what the criticism
works for our students. They really do enjoy just knowing that people can have extremely high levels of accomplishment and they are still just folks.
And you are one of the good guys, John Jennings, not just an awesome person and a great artist, but a professor of media and cultural studies at UC Riverside, part of that growing hotbed of Afrofuturism as we take over the world from little by little from California. Woohoo! But anyway, thank you so much for doing this class. It's really an overview of Afrofuturism. Some people who registered know next to nothing about it. So I'm going to just start you out on the most basic level. What does Afrofuturism, or the Black Speculative Arts Movement, as it's also called, mean to you personally? When did it first speak to you? I'm sure it was before it had a name.
So I would say like Afrofuturism spoke to me like I want to say like 2008 or so. That's the first time I came across the term. Because actually like a lot of people who come to it, you think about science fiction, you're thinking about identity, and it just seems natural to me. It seems like it was a natural space. So when I started making these black cycling images a few years ago, a friend of mine, Dana Rush, she's an Africanist, right? And so she studies African art. So she says, "Hey, these look Afrofuturist." And I'm like, "Okay, is that a thing? What is that?" I was like, "You're making up words, And lo and behold, though, once I started doing some research and understanding, and that was actually, I had come to, Black speculative writers before. I think by this time, I had come across your work, not even later Stephen's work, and I wasn't really putting, one and one together and seeing that this was all part of the same kind of, movement or an aspect of it. So that is actually what empowered me to start looking more at the intersections between identity, politics, and these radical ideas around Black futures. So I think that actually sort of galvanized the connection between what I was teaching in the classroom and what I was making. And so from then on, I just started focusing on what has been called Afrofuturism, or aspects of Black speculative culture. Am I coming across something?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I would say like that's when, and this is actually honestly like a little after Octavia Butler passed away,
Right.
And I still actually it all wasn't gelling in my head at first, And I think once that was a good touchstone for me, Afrofuturism as a name or as a concept was the first time that I thought about all of these things as being part of each other,
The Bible says that without a vision, the people perish. That one of the importances of science fiction is not just to ask what our place is in the natural world from a phenomenological scientific perspective, but just to be able to project yourself into the future. Because if the process of creating a slave, and Black Americans are descendants of slaves primarily, is the process of turning wolves into dogs. It is getting them to forget that they used to be wild and free and determine themselves, and program them to think there's something else. As we start waking up from this nightmare, we find ourselves surrounded by images that were used to oppress us, to say, this is who you are. So as we begin to say, no, we may be dealing with this right now, but there's milk and honey on the other side. That's what they said back in kind of religious days. Then we started creating fantasies. Then we started integrating in the sciences. To me, the Afrofuturism is the fantasies and now the sciences integrated in to ask, where are we in the universe? What would you say is the gap between the present and future we were offered by the culture and what it is that we are currently projecting for ourselves, the dreams we are creating for ourselves as children of the diaspora?
Good question, honey.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, man. I mean, the gap. Wow. It's something I've been kind of wrestling with too. It's like, okay, so why now? Why this resurgence of this interest in Afrofuturism, or as some people call it, the Black Speculative Arts Movement, Afrofuturism 2.0, or what have you. I think one of the well, there's several, I think, touchstones that actually kind of started creating these connections. And one, I think, was the election of Barack Obama as president.
Amen.
was one thing.
Good.
You know, because until then, the only time we had seen black presidents, for the most part, were in science fiction shows anyway. You know, the other thing I think was the ubiquitous nature, or the democratization of the tools of creation. You know, also. Like we have access or more access to this technology that you're talking about. Even the idea that we can create this archive in this class in this manner.
Isn't this amazing?
It is.
That we can literally stitch this together. We can take Skype and we can take a simple recording tool and YouTube and then a webinar, thing, and then actually create something where we're having students, and I think it's at least three different countries.
Right.
And it will spread. It will spread.
Yes.
So you can go as deep, if you have a knowledge base about that, you can go as deep into that as you want to. I mean, right now, just because that question of the democratization of technology is central to the discussion. Take this any way you want to go, buddy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's definitely an aspect, but also how that technology is used in distribution. So you have like the creation of the tool, basically the tools such as say like this free software or apps of that nature, but also the ability to actually make make new tools. I think it was Audre Lorde that said you cannot unmake the master's house with the master's tools, right? Yeah. But I was thinking, so now I'm like, well, what about remixing the tools themselves? Because that's what we're doing now.
Yes.
So actually taking the tools and actually changing them according to, as you were stating, like how our ancestors might have like hacked into things and actually changed the world, right? So I think one of the main gaps I would say is just a lack of connection to our history. Which is changing. So I think if there's a connection with storytelling, because history is just a series of stories, right? Yes. And then prove that with Lion's Blood and your work, right? As far as like how you're remixing and re-emphasizing perspective. The future is up for grabs. Which I love about it. That and also these different like gaps in memory. Which I think is what I call the ethnographic. This notion of like these abstract, more haunted spaces that are connecting us in a particular way too. But I think one of the main gaps would be just a lack of connection to our own history. Look at something like Hidden Figures, right? Where these particular types, these women, these amazing women, are discovered like they're ancient artifacts, what have you. But they're there. I mean, but hidden by whom and hidden by what? I mean, there's so many people like that. So many inventors and so many creators, and so this notion of like. And as you were saying, Stephen, too, the other thing is hiding those images or hiding those gaps, if you want to call them that, is the stereotyping or the construction of identity through visual culture, right? Which is something that I've been thinking about a lot, which is what I call critical race design studies, right?
Wow. Would you explain what that means exactly?
Yeah, actually, here's the thing. So fairly recently, I've been thinking a lot about my role as a Black designer. I'm a pretty decent designer, right? And I was actually the first African American to get tenure in art at the University of Illinois in 2008.
Right? Congratulations!
Yeah, but also then I mentored one of the next faculty who was in 2015 is Patrick Earl-Hammy. So and what I'm getting at is that a lot of times we don't see ourselves reflected in the really, really mental discourse around art making and aesthetics, right? And why is that? Because we're looked at as craftsmen and entertainers sometimes, right? A lot of times that was the stereotype around the Black body. We can perform in these different physical ways, right? But to be an artist is to have a mental rigor and a connection to an aesthetic, which is more about the mental work.
Would you do me the favor of defining? Give us a definition of art, please. Your definition.
Definition of art. People still trying to discover that. Honestly, I actually always like Baldwin's connection to art. Artists are here to disturb the peace, right? So I think that art is kind of like a resonance of a creative impulse. Whether it's and it's definitely like more about self-expression. And it could be writing, it could be performance art, But I think what it is a reification that is a manifestation of a critical urge or creative urge, that then manifests itself. And it can be in different ways. And a lot of times for us, it is, it is speaking to a particular type of freedom, creative freedom. Let me get back to this critical race design studies thing because I've been thinking about it for a while. So are you guys familiar with speculative design?
Not yet.
Okay, so check it out. So I've been really disenchanted with design. That's why I went into media studies. A lot of times designers are still working at the behest of like really large corporations and multinational entities that are utilizing this creative impulse that we just mentioned to sell things to us that we don't need. You don't need that new car. You don't necessarily need that new hairdo. You don't necessarily need those new shoes. But a designer's job is actually help to create a system of perceived lack. The perception of lack.
Yes.
Exactly. Helps drop the market.
Yes.
You don't. So for instance, if you buy this one thing, then you'll be complete. That's kind of like what drives the market, or part of what drives the market. And so designers a lot of times are working for advertising agencies, marketing agencies, and there's a sliver of us that are doing like more community minded things, say like with non for profits or or the like, right? So I've been disenchanted. I've been teaching design for about 18 years, and I found that the type of work that I was doing in the classroom wasn't necessarily jiving with my own political or creative interests, right? And so a lot of times I'd be trying to I try to integrate a lot of these theoretical or philosophical questions into the studio, and the students just want to leave with a great portfolio, so you get your corner office as the art director, right? So I come across speculative design, which is a combination of looking at design thinking, like design inquiry, designing for a client, but imagining storytelling or prototypes of what could be possible futures, right? And so the biggest, the most prominent book on the subject is called Speculative Everything, and it's by this team, Don and Raby out of the UK. And of course, they're talking about more Western European ideas around science fiction. There's a giant hole around race and around the African diaspora, of course, right? Because they're right from this particular perspective, right? So, for instance, you look at someone like Derek Bell, right, who wrote Space Traders. Wonderful law professor as well, right? What he did with Space Traders and with his work, he was actually using what is called a diegetic prototype, that is using storytelling as a type of way of seeing to actually imagine what a particular type of story scenario could be. That's what the law is, really. It's a series of stories, right? Like precedents. So he was like, well, what if this happened? So this is what speculative design is. But when you put a critical race aspect to it, you start to really get into some interesting ground. So I actually have a definition that I've created for you guys, too. Let me see if I can find my... Just I left my phone. Hold on a second. All right. So basically, what I define critical race design studies, and I'm actually just written a class around this too that I want to teach at UC Riverside, an interdisciplinary design practice that intersects critical race theory, speculative design history, and critical making to analyze and critique the effects of visual communication, graphic objects, and their associated systemic mediations of racial identity. So
there's a mouthful.
So
wow, unpack that one for us, please.
What we're looking at? So we're looking at an interdisciplinary design practice that's connecting visual anthropology, speculative design, cultural studies, media studies, all these different humanity studies. But critical making, is something that's actually taught at the Rhode Island School of Art and Design, where the deliverable, like the designed object, isn't actually the thing. The process by making is what you're getting from. It's almost like doing like a writing exercise, where it's actually it's the writing process that is the deliverable. So we actually, for instance, say for instance, I make a logo just to go through it, right? But the process of how do you do it is actually the thing that's being taught. That's critical making. So instead of writing, say, a paper about something, I've made an object that you can use, say a mug or a T-shirt design or something like that. But it's the process that actually is the thing, right? So that's why I put like a really big emphasis on this idea of critical thinking. So I'm thinking about artists who are being taught, these ideas around critical race theory and creating stories and diegetic objects that are then being used to actually think about what could happen if this particular scenario played out through a racialized lens, that kind of thing, right? So, so that's kind of like what I'm getting at. So there are three different components for me. One is analyzing these images that you were talking about earlier, Stephen. The racialized stereotypes, the embodiment of a racist system, basically like the indexes of a racist system. So that's one thing we want to look at. Like, why are these things created, right? And they're to actually encase us or imprison us and say ourselves, like they're projected upon us, right? And we're always trying to struggle to get out of those. So that's what a stereotype kind of is, right? So then you're looking at the documentation. For instance, graphic designers, created Jim Crow signage, right? There had to be a system. It was a manifestation of a system. So if you go and do enough research, you'll actually find the exact kerning and placement of no niggas allowed, right? Or no Jews allowed. No, Jews and dogs not allowed. Those types of things, right? So there's a system that actually had the exact typeface, the exact paper grade, the exact line spacing for something that is a manifestation of a racist system. That's part of it too. That's design history, right? So the third part is then to look at how African American or Black designers or Black artists from the diaspora are then using the same types of art making to then unmake that system. So then you're looking at people like what's his name, Hank Willis Thomas or Glenn Ligon or Carrie Mae Weems, who are artists who are actually using typographic systems to then hack into how our bodies have been, displaced or distorted through graphic design. So here's the thing. So there's this book called Looking for Leroy. It's by Mark Anthony Neal, right? And so in the subtitle, he talks about masculinity and legibility, which I find extremely fascinating. So the Leroy he's talking about is Michael, I think his name was Michael Anthony Ray. He played Leroy on Fame. Remember Fame?
Yeah. Right, yes. James Anthony Ray. I think it was, but yeah.
So what he was getting at was that Leroy was a very strong, very powerful character, but he actually also had this kind of this abstract kind of fluid notion of how he performed masculinity, right? And some of it was because he might have been homosexual, he might have been, what have you, but it was a very powerful portrayal of various types of masculine performance, right? So I guess what I'm saying is how do people who don't necessarily fit this stereotype about what a Black man is supposed to be, or who's actually taking cool pose and pushing it forward, where do those people fit in? So what we're doing is we're looking at say someone like Trayvon Martin, for instance, right? What was his Black body saying to Zimmerman, right?
He had his height.
Well, the legibility of his body. Yeah. He was reading him as a threat.
Right.
That particular body text did not jive with the text in that space. You ever notice that a lot of times racism is connected to spatial representations too, right?
Please.
So for instance, like red lines, right? The first thing you want to do is you actually want to segregate, or tie a particular racist stereotype to a place, that kind of thing. Anyway, so those are some of the things that you would study in design, like how architecture, graphic design, all different types of visual communications have perpetrated, this misreading of the Black body. So I want to actually talk about those things in the classes.
Wow.
Anyway, so I'm gonna stop talking. But yeah, so I think it might be a new. I lied. I'm still talking. I'm sorry. So I'm thinking honestly that this might be a new area of study in design.
One of the things I would like you to look at when you're doing this is a whole different discussion is the perception of negative space.
Yes.
The hard thing to see, in other words, like the martial art of Aikido is about the space between bodies that are moving at you. When you're traveling through the forest, you have to keep your eyes on the space between the trees or you'll crash. The thing that's easy to see is what's in the foreground. But the spaces created by those gaps are just as important and tend to be invisible until we are educated to see them. I want you to go into that in whatever class you're going to be doing, and no, we would love to participate in whatever it is. I think I can speak for tonight.
Talk more about it because see, what you're talking about to me is typography. So typography is the art of laying type, but it's all about the shape of an absence.
Yes.
Like so, basically, the shape of an absence. So what you're talking about is like the shape that or the void that is made by either an object that is coming or going or actually static. Yeah, that's typography.
And linguistically, in terms of hypnotic language, it's called the transderivational search. Where does your mind go when it hears a word in order to define the word? The gap. It's like jazz is what happens between the notes.
That's
anyway,
right.
that's a whole different, that's a whole other level, brother.
What's really tripped out is like I actually have this idea for a story called All the Spaces in Between.
Yes.
And and this is something I was putting out there. My grandfather was functioning when I was there. He literally signed his name with an X. Right? And I've often thought about if he had access to literacy, various types of literacy, what his life would have been like. And so I want to do this story eventually about me imagining what Albert Lee Thompson, what his life would have been if actually he had access to, say, literacy in a particular way.
Please write that story. I'd love to be a mentor for you and helping you do that. That sounds like a really solid story.
I want to move to your work a moment, John. This has been mind blowing, but I don't want to forget that I have Pitch Black Rainbow, which is your book that I wrote the foreword to, and all these just lovely images in here. I'm not going to be able to do them justice on Skype, God knows, but just to sort of give people a taste of what we're looking at here. And we don't want to forget the new adaptation backwards that you just did, Octavia Butler's Kindred with Damien Duffy. When did you discover art in your life? Let's go back. Let's go way back.
Oh, no. I'm about to fit this time and put it in my foot. I'm about to fit it.
Tell me, who was the boy who discovered art? What was that about? Because I know for me, art was a reaction to racism and erasure and history and all kinds of things. What was it for you?
Yes. Well, so I think from the beginning, I actually had a very visual aptitude. So I had an uncle. His name is Willie Albert, and he was a very talented artist. And so as far as like someone who was actually making art, he was my first introduction. And I'm gonna say I was like 4 or 5. I started drawing like really early. He actually, stopped drawing, and became a truck driver and lived his life, what have you. But I still think about the images that he made for me. He could draw anything from memory. It was amazing talent that he gave up, which is heartbreaking. But he basically one day he told me, he said, "Hey, go draw your own." He was tired. He was like, "Go draw your own thing." I said, "Okay," because I'm kind of stubborn. You know what I'm saying? So I actually started drawing. That's when I remember started trying to draw things. And one of the earliest images I remember is of this really, really bad drawing of the Mighty Thor. So what happens is like my mom was she was a literature major at Alcorn State University in Norman, Mississippi, which is one of the 4 HBCUs in Mississippi. I went to Jackson State.
We would never have guessed that.
I know. Actually, anyway. So she actually what ends up happening is she meets my father, gets pregnant with me, and doesn't end up finishing. And we ends up, moving back in with my grandparents. And so I was raised by my grandparents and my mom, in the woods, deep in the woods, So the only thing I had was like them and my, my rummaging through the forest and my imagination. So I was literally like lay on top of a barn, which my mom hated because she thought I was going to break my neck, and stare at the stars. I was a stargazer, super early, and I was imagining what those stars meant, that kind of thing. And so I started making images really, really super early. So imagine my surprise when I discovered constellations. I was like, whoa, wait, let me get this straight. There's pictures in the sky and have stories. Let's look. So, so I started making this stuff. And my mom actually was an avid watcher of like horror movies and science fiction and fantasy stuff. And I know, right? It was mom. Yeah. Between that and my grandmother telling me like spook stories and superstitions that I thought were superstitions, in retrospect, were probably hoodoo practices. Like she probably was a conjure woman on the side, and I didn't know it. You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. In retrospect, I think that's what was going down. So yeah, my grandmother is telling me all these spooky stories, and I'm going to the library trying to prove her wrong, pretty much. And I'm making all these images. So I started super early wanting to be an artist in some fashion. I didn't know exactly how. I didn't have the roadmap, so to speak. And then I ended up, eventually going to Jackson State to study art. And I was doing a lot of cartooning. I was doing a lot of freelance work for my peers. And I ended up getting a job at the Clarion Ledger, which is the largest Mississippi paper, as an illustrator. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to actually think about going into education. So I actually ended up getting a fellowship to study art education at the University of Illinois. So my first master's was in art education. I got that in 95. But then I fell in love with design. So I ended up getting a terminal degree in design. So that's kind of like my educational journey. But I went back to my alma mater, Jackson State. I started the graphic design program pretty much. And was there for like 4 years. And since then I've been, just challenging how design has been taught in those spaces. So recently, actually super recently, this weekend actually, I found out that this young woman that I had been working with for many years, like since she was a freshman at the University of Illinois, her name is Nikita Thomas. I taught her there. Then she followed me to the University of Buffalo. She got her MFA there. And now she's become the first African-American woman to work tenure track, in design at University of Illinois.
Great.
Congratulations.
So
Yeah. I was so proud of her.
You must be very proud.
Seeding the way.
It's seriously very emotional for me because I know how much she had to overcome to get to that space. And that's one of the things that I think working in a speculative gives us. We actually can connect those stories and make those things happen before they. Yeah.
I have this goal of enabling 1 million awake, aware adult human beings. And my chosen methodology is to create and support 1,000 adult aware storytellers and artists.
Wow.
I mean, I believe that 1,000 awake, aware artists can change this planet because we can get our vision out there. And you are, what you just said, you touched a life. Now that's just one life that you have touched. Somebody who's willing to commit to your path, to see you as a mentor, to invest. She saw that if she followed you, she could get out of the woods.
Right.
Okay. Right. And in my mind, every one of us who is willing to, you said that the artistic impulse is that impulse to self-expression, to find that thing within us and then to filter it through craft so that it can communicate on the other side. And so you're a griot, you're a teacher. The path of mastery is not a position, it's a process. It is every day. This is how I will live, and I feel that the message that you are saying. I'm so happy that we decided to speak to you because we want to magnify your message. It is exactly the kind of thing that you are saying that we want to get behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that seriously, and thank you. And I'm honored. I didn't really talk about how honored it was to offer your mentorship. I was like, that my heart skipped a beat a little bit. So I just want to put that out there.
It was 100% sincere. What we're hoping to do, this class is going to be the beginning of something. We want to create a nexus online where we can speak to people who are doing these things and to be a place like Grand Central Station where our class, this website will connect to you. And it will connect to these other artists, and people will be able to educate themselves fully simply by being a place where we can allow you and people like you to express your voice and to share what it is that we know. I know that for me, I'm at the point in my life where I want to simply empty myself out before I die.
Right. Yeah.
And so I see you as being the next the next generation, then your students are the generation after that. So
Right.
it's a chain, buddy. this is
Oh yeah,
great.
no, definitely. I mean that. Well, so for instance, I mean, you're familiar with Theaster Gates' work, right? The artist out of Chicago.
Say the
Theaster
name again.
Gates.
Oh, Theaster.
Theaster
No,
Gates.
I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, you should check him out. So his background is actually pottery. He's working in ceramics. He's a pottery, sculpture.
You're going to educate us. You're going to tell us who are the graphic designers we need to speak to. And we will go through you and find them. And then we'll go through them to find others. Like I said, that you're probably going to end up being on our board of directors and to help us to understand the things that we don't know.
Oh, I would love however I can offer, my services. But so what's really wonderful about this gentleman is that, I saw him speaking to Bell Hooks, and she was in residency at the New School in New York. And so he was talking about like you're saying, Stephen, the process, right? The process of learning in the studio, becoming a master's student, right? So you're working with materials, but the materials aren't that important. It actually is the process that you're learning through, right? So essentially what he started doing was using his money that he made as an artist and purchasing old buildings in Chicago. And then what he started doing from there is actually turning these buildings into community centers in Chicago, right? And essentially he's still making pies, right? He's still making ceramics. He's still using that same artistic, methodology, but the materiality has changed to the community.
That's
what I'm saying?
Real life world building.
What I've been doing with these Black, comic book festivals is design. Because what we really need to do is to think about how do we reshape the Black subjectivity. Because what's happened is, throughout the years, we haven't had that much control over how we've been seen and how people are reacting to us. There's a lack of literacy around Blackness, around what Black people are and how we function. That kind of thing, or just the myriad notions of how we are. Because what happens with a stereotype is you essentialize and entrap the identity in that stereotype. The word stereos literally means hard or fixed. That's what it means. It's from the Greek term. It means hard or fixed. So that notion of fixity is something that I think storytelling starts to disrupt. So what I'm saying. So we disrupt those notions, and push back against those projections. And I think that's why Afrofuturism, the Black Spectrum Arts movement, all these different places are so important for us.
Beautiful.
Beautifully put. I always love hearing you speak about your work and hearing your perspective. Yeah.
Those words were as powerful as we're going to get in this particular session. We can obviously have 1,000 conversations.
Oh, we can talk for 2 hours.
But let's close this section out. We would rather have you feel that there was more to say, and then we get you back another time than to feel like we're dragging it out too long.
But thank you so much, John Jennings, and can't wait to see what's next from you. And thank you for enriching our students with your vision and your wisdom.
Yes, and I'll definitely be calling on you guys as well because I'm going to be teaching the Afrofuturism and Visual Culture class.
Fantastic.
Right? Absolutely.
Now, this is the beginning of a conversation.
We'll be there.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Love you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was John Jennings. Hopefully we won't be stuck on refresh this time when we transition back. We will not be meeting this upcoming Saturday because Steve will be out of town. What's going on?
I don't know.
It still thinks it's screen
sharing. It still thinks it's screen sharing.
Yeah, that's where the problem is.